Jack was the only human on the alien research team. He wasn't strong like the warriors or clever like the scientists, but he had a kind heart, and that made him different. He always helped, even when no one asked him to. He carried heavy boxes, cleaned tools, and shared his food one day. The team set up camp near a strange jungle on planet Zevera. The jungle was thick, green, and full of strange sounds. No one dared to enter too deep. It was full of danger. Old legend said something rare lived in the jungle. A flower so beautiful, it glowed under moonlight. They called it the bloom of Zevara. It was believed to be the rarest flower in the galaxy, maybe even extinct. At sunset, the crew gathered around a small fire, laughing and sharing stories. Princess Leora, the alien leader's daughter, sat near Jack. She was tall, with silver skin and glowing blue eyes. Her laugh was soft, but sharp, like she was always hiding something. She looked at Jack and said, "You've been so helpful, human." He smiled, a little shy, and shrugged. Then she said, half joking, "If you find the bloom of Zevara, I'll be yours." The others laughed loudly. Some clapped, some howled, and someone shouted, "Good luck with that, human." Jack smiled politely, but deep inside, something lit up. He didn't laugh. He didn't think it was just a joke. To him, it felt like a challenge, a mission. He looked at Leora with steady eyes, but she had already turned away, sipping her drink. That night, while everyone slept, Jack sat by the edge of the jungle, thinking. He remembered something an old trader once told him. Nothing rare stays hidden forever. Just need someone foolish enough to go looking. He packed a small bag, a flashlight, a water can, a scanner, and a knife. He wrote a note and left it by his tent. Then he walked quietly into the jungle. Step by step, the darkness was thick and strange bugs flew past his face. Leaves brushed against his arms like ghost hands. He didn't stop, even when he heard distant growls. He didn't turn back, even when he stepped into cold, muddy water. Every sound made his heart pound, but he kept moving forward, guided by one thought: find the flower, prove himself, and maybe, just maybe, win her heart. Back at the camp, morning came, and the others stretched and yawned. When Leora found the note, her smile faded. He really went? She whispered. She didn't mean for him to take it seriously. The crew searched the area, but only found tracks leading into the jungle. "He's not coming back," said one warrior. "He'll be eaten by dusk," said another. Leora looked at the trees, her face unreadable. No one saw the small flicker of worry in her eyes. But deep inside, something shifted. A joke had turned into a choice. And that choice was now a risk. Jack, meanwhile, had climbed a rocky hill, breathing hard. His scanner blinked with weak signals, nothing strong. But he saw something strange. Group of trees in perfect circles. In the middle, strange markings on the ground. Almost like a path, he followed it, curiosity growing. Birds with glass-like feathers flew past him, their cries sharp and eerie. He took note of each step, every sound, every light. By evening, he found a cave with vines covering the entrance. He pushed through and slipped inside. It was damp, but glowing mushrooms lit the walls. In the center, on a flat stone, was something unexpected, a carving. It showed a human, standing before the bloom of Zevara. The flower had 5 petals, each glowing like a star. Underneath, the carving read, "Only the one who walks with no laughter will find the truth." Jack stared at the carving, heart racing. Was it real? Had someone found it before? Why was a human drawn here? So many questions, but one thing was clear: he was on the right path. As he turned to leave, he felt something watching him. He spun around, but saw nothing. The jungle was silent now. Too silent. He stepped outside and looked up. 2 glowing eyes blinked in the trees above. Then they vanished. He took a deep breath. Gripping his knife tightly, something or someone had seen him, but Jack didn't run. He looked back at the path ahead and walked deeper into the unknown. Because this wasn't just about a flower anymore. It was about proving that a joke could become destiny. And somewhere, far behind him, Leora stood at the jungle's edge. Her fingers touched the note again, and for the first time in her life, the joke didn't feel funny. The jungle grew darker even though the sun was rising. Jack's boots sank into wet ground, and strange thorns scratched at his arms. His flashlight flickered as fog rolled between twisted trees. He could hear whispers, not from people, but from the jungle itself. It felt alive, watching, listening, waiting. He kept moving, one slow step at a time. His scanner gave soft beeps now and then, but the signals were too weak. Jack didn't know where he was anymore, only that turning back was harder than going forward. He followed a line of purple moss that seemed to point toward something. He didn't question why it felt right, he just followed. At one point, he stepped too close to a glowing mushroom. It sprayed a cloud of gas and his vision spun for a moment. Shapes danced around him, hands reached from shadows. He dropped to one knee and closed his eyes until it passed. When he opened them again, the moss path was still there, guiding him. Back at the camp, Leora stood with arms crossed, staring into the jungle. The others told her to forget him. No one survives past the dark roots, one guard said. The beasts don't leave bones behind, said another. But Leora didn't speak. She thought of Jack's eyes when she made that joke. She remembered how he didn't laugh like the others. That look wasn't humor, it was promise. She turned to her father, the Emperor, and asked him to send a search team. He refused without even looking up from his tablet. No human is worth risking my men, he said coldly. Leora clenched her jaw and walked away, deep in the jungle. Jack found strange trees growing in spirals. Their trunks were smooth like stone, and they hummed softly when he passed. One of them had carving simple marks in a circle. He placed his hand on it, and the tree pulsed once with a soft glow. Then something clicked underground, and part of the dirt shifted, revealing a stone step. He followed the hidden path down into a low cave. It smelled like old rain and ash inside. There was a stone table with vines wrapped around it. Jack stepped closer, and the vines unwrapped themselves slowly, like waking snakes. On the table was a piece of bone shaped like an arrowhead. It pointed to a wall with more carvings. An old map. The map wasn't of the jungle, but of the stars, and on one corner, someone had marked a glowing flower with 5 dots. Beside it were 3 symbols he couldn't read. Jack took a picture with his scanner, then turned to leave. As he reached the top of the steps, he stopped. In front of him stood a figure tall, with skin like cracked stone and eyes like fire. It didn't speak, just watched him with slow blinking eyes. Jack didn't run. He simply nodded once and stepped aside. The figure watched him pass, then faded into the mist. Jack didn't know what it was, but something told him it wasn't there to hurt him. It was guarding something, or someone, ours. Later, rain began to fall, light at first, then heavy. Jack found shelter under thick roots of a giant tree. He pulled out a ration bar and ate slowly, thinking of Leora. Was she still laughing at him? Did she even care he was gone? He didn't know, but the thought didn't stop him. He was doing this for himself now, not just for her. Lightning flashed in the distance, lighting up a huge shape between trees. A tower, half covered by vines, stood far ahead. It looked ancient, forgotten and broken. He stared at it, then smiled. This was it. It had to be suddenly. He heard something behind him. He spun around, holding his knife, but it was only a shadow moving between trees, fast and quiet. Then he saw it again, closer. This time, not an animal, something wearing armor, something watching him. He held his breath and stepped back slowly. But the figure didn't follow. It simply pointed toward the tower, then vanished like mist in the wind. Jack's heart pounded, but he moved forward. Rain soaked his clothes, and mud covered his boots. But nothing could stop him now. He didn't know what waited inside that tower. But it was part of the path, and he had come too far to turn around. Back at camp, Leora stood alone, holding a new note. One of the scouts had found it in the outer trees, written in Jack's handwriting. It said only one thing: "I'm going to find it." She stared at the note for a long time. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "If he does, What will I say? The tower was silent, broken, and leaning slightly like it wanted to fall but didn't dare. Vines hung from its stone walls like old hair, and strange symbols glowed faintly across its base. Jack stood at the entrance, soaked in rain and covered in mud. He had been walking for hours, but his eyes still burned with purpose. He reached out and touched the symbol nearest to him. It was cold, then suddenly warm. The door slid open without a sound. Inside, the air was dry and still. There were no animals here, no plants, just smooth stone walls and blue light coming from cracks in the floor. He stepped in, and the door shut behind him with a slow grinding sound. Jack didn't panic. He believed this place was part of the test. Something inside him whispered to trust the path. The hallway led to a large chamber with broken machines and old bones scattered on the floor. In the center, there was a raised platform, and above it floated a strange crystal. The crystal turned slowly, glowing with soft green light. Jack stepped closer, and suddenly the room lit up. A voice filled the air, smooth and not human. "You are not like the others," it said. "You carry no greed, only promise." Jack looked around but saw no speaker. Then the voice spoke again. "You seek the bloom of Zavara, but you are not ready." He opened his mouth to speak, but the voice continued. "You must find the keeper, the one who lost and still remembers." The crystal dimmed, and the door behind him opened again. Without thinking, Jack turned and left the chamber. Outside, the storm had passed, and the sky was now orange with the setting sun. As he walked down a slope from the tower, he spotted a figure sitting by a dead fire. It was an alien with cracked armor and tired eyes. The figure looked up and stared at Jack for a long time, then said, "You're the human who went into the tower." Jack nodded and stepped closer. "My name's Jack," he said. The figure grunted. "I'm Vec," he replied. "I came here 20 years ago, looking for the same flower you now chase." Vec's voice was rough, and his face was filled with scars. He pointed to the jungle behind him. "I lost everything in there," he said. "My crew, my ship, my reason." Jack sat beside him without speaking. He waited, and slowly Vec began to talk. "There is a map," Vec said. "Not the kind you scan, but one passed through story and bone." He pulled out a thin tablet covered in carvings. "It shows the place of the final test, but I never reached it." Jack leaned forward, but Vec pulled the tablet back. "I'll trade it," he said, "for your food." Jack looked at his last food bar, then handed it over without a word. Vec took it and gave him the map. "You'll need more than strength to survive the final stretch," he warned. "It's not about fighting, it's about knowing who you are." Jack studied the map and saw the shape of a valley, marked with one symbol, the flower. There was also a strange mark above it, like a flame with a single eye. He didn't know what it meant, but he would find out the next morning. Jack left Vec behind and followed the map deeper into the jungle. The trees grew taller and more twisted, and the air grew heavier. Sometimes he saw shadows watching him, but they didn't attack. He began to notice something strange. His body felt lighter, his mind clearer, like the jungle wasn't trying to stop him anymore. He reached a narrow canyon and followed a glowing path carved into the rocks. As he walked, the carvings lit up behind him, one by one. Then they stopped glowing once he passed, like the jungle was sealing the path. At the end of the canyon, he found a door made of living wood. It pulsed gently, like it was breathing. He raised his hand to touch it, but before he could, the door opened by itself. Inside was a wide open space filled with light, not from the sky, but from the ground. It was like walking into a dream, and in the center stood something unexpected. A tree with silver leaves and a single bud glowing red at its tip. Jack stepped forward, but the light shifted. Suddenly he wasn't in the valley anymore. He was back in the camp. The crew laughed. Liara looked at him, and the joke echoed again. "If you find the bloom, I'll be yours." But this time, no one laughed. They turned away from him all at once. Only Liara remained, and she whispered, "Do you think I meant it?" Jack blinked, and the vision faded. He was back in front of the tree again. And now the bud was opening slowly, showing 5 bright petals. He didn't know what he had done or why it worked, but he stepped forward with one word in his heart truth, and the flower bloomed for him as if it had been waiting all along. The flower stood open, glowing gently in the air. Each petal shimmered like soft fire, bending light in strange ways. Jack reached toward it, but the ground suddenly shook. The silver tree pulled its roots back and the flower vanished into the earth. Before Jack could react, the floor gave way beneath his feet. He fell, not screaming, just breathing fast. He landed hard, but not on stone, instead, on soft moss that glowed like starlight. Above him, the opening closed, and he was alone in the dark. Then a soft hum began, like music made by wind and memory. Lights floated in the air, shaped like forgotten faces. A new voice filled the space, deep and calm. "You have touched truth, but not earned it." Jack stood up slowly, heart racing but feet steady. "I came here to find it," he said. "No," the voice replied. "You came here because of a joke." Jack's fists tightened, but he said nothing. The voice spoke again. "If you want the bloom, show me your heart." Suddenly, the chamber lit up, and Jack found himself back on Earth, but not the real Earth. A memory twisted by something powerful. He was a child again, standing in the ruins of a broken building. His parents were gone, and people walked past without seeing him. He turned, and Leora was there, watching him silently. But her face wasn't mocking, it was sad. "Why do you want me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Jack looked at her, but didn't speak. The world twisted again, showing him the day he left Earth. The day he boarded the ship alone, carrying a small bag and one photo. The voice whispered, "You never wanted love, only a place to belong." Jack sank to his knees, the truth hitting him harder than stone. Maybe it had never been about the flower. Maybe it was about being seen, about mattering to someone. The vision faded, and the mossy chamber returned. A glowing shape stood in front of him, now a tall figure made of wood and light. Its face was smooth, without eyes, but Jack could feel it watching. "You passed," it said. Jack blinked, confused. "I didn't do anything," he said. "You saw yourself," the figure replied. "That is the hardest thing for any soul." The ground opened again, but gently this time. A platform rose, carrying Jack upward through glowing vines and soft light. When he reached the top, the flower waited for him again, blooming silently. He stepped forward and plucked it carefully. The petals didn't fall. The stem didn't wilt. Instead, it pulsed with warm energy in his hand. For the first time since he entered the jungle, he smiled, not for Leora, not for the crew, but for himself. He turned and began his journey back. The jungle no longer growled or moved against him. It opened for him now, guiding him like an old friend. Even the fog seemed to move aside as he walked. Elsewhere, in the alien base, Leora woke from a strange dream. She had seen Jack in the jungle, holding the flower. It was no longer a joke, it was real. She rushed to the command tower and ordered the satellite scanner to search the deep jungle. The crew rolled their eyes, but obeyed as the scans started. One of the officers shouted, "I'm picking up a heat signature moving fast." Leora leaned forward, eyes wide. Another signal lit up a second shape behind the first. Following him quietly, Jack was unaware, walking calmly with the flower in a sealed case. But behind him, in the shadow of the trees, something moved. It was tall, thin, and wearing broken armor. Its steps made no sound, and its eyes burned softly. It had followed him since the cave and didn't plan to stop. When Jack reached the river crossing, he paused and took a breath. He didn't feel afraid anymore. The flower was safe, and the journey was almost over. He stepped onto the bridge of roots that curved over the river. The air grew colder, and he suddenly felt watched again. He turned slowly, and there it was, the shadow figure from before. Jack didn't run. He stepped off the bridge and faced it. "What do you want?" he asked. The figure didn't speak. Instead, It reached toward the case in Jack's hand, but the flower glowed so bright it forced the shadow back. Then the light bent, forming a circle around Jack, pushing the figure away into the trees. Stood there, breathing fast but safe, and when he looked down, the flower's glow dimmed slightly, as if to say, "You're not done yet." Jack kept walking, one step at a time. The base was just over the next hill, and he knew this was no longer a quest. It was a turning point, not just for him, but for Leora, for the crew, and maybe for everyone. No one expected him to come back, so when Jack appeared at the edge of the camp with dirt-stained clothes, a torn jacket, and a sealed case glowing faintly in his arms, silence fell like a hammer. All eyes turned to him, but no one moved, even. The guards who usually mocked him stood frozen. The camp's fire crackled behind them, but no one heard it. Jack didn't say a word. He just walked through the crowd like a ghost who had seen too much. The alien crew stepped aside without knowing why. Something about his eyes, or maybe the way the jungle itself seemed to part behind him, made people feel small. Leora stepped forward, unsure if she was dreaming. She hadn't slept since the dream, since she saw him standing in the light. Now he was here, real and alive, and holding the thing she once joked about like it meant nothing. He stopped in front of her, opened the case slowly, and tilted it toward her. The bloom of Zavara sat inside, glowing softly like it had a heartbeat. The 5 petals shimmered, and as Leora stepped closer, the glow pulsed brighter. She stared at it, lips parted but no words coming out. The flower leaned slightly toward her, as if recognizing her voice before she even spoke. Jack said nothing, just waited. Then came the voice they didn't expect, her father's, sharp and cold. "So the human returns from the dead jungle with a toy," the Emperor said. Stepping out from his large silver tent, he looked at the flower with disinterest, like it was a stone on the ground. "You think my daughter will honor her joke?" He laughed. "The bloom is a tale for fools." Jack didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Leora, watching for any sign, any flicker of truth. But Leora said nothing, and her silence burned more than her father's words. Around them, crew members gathered, some recording with small devices, others just staring in awe. They had never seen the bloom with their own eyes. No one had, not in over 100 years. One of the older aliens whispered, "It should not exist." The Emperor raised a hand, and a guard stepped forward with a weapon. "Enough," the Emperor said. "End this. Take the flower." The guard reached out to grab the case, but the moment his hand touched it, the flower flashed bright gold. A shockwave pushed everyone back except Jack and Leora. The guard flew several feet and hit the ground groaning. The bloom hovered upward, floating out of the case, and when it reached the air above them, it began to hum. From that hum came something unexpected, a voice, but it wasn't like the jungle voice Jack had heard. This voice was soft, ancient, and somehow female. It said only one word, "Leora," she gasped, stepping back like the sound had struck her chest. The flower turned slowly in the air and lowered itself into her hands. She held it like it might vanish, her fingers trembling. "It spoke my name," she whispered, eyes wide. The Emperor stepped back, looking shaken for the first time. "That's impossible," he muttered. "No artifact should respond to bloodline." Jack finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "It did." He looked at Leora, not smiling, not angry, just honest. "You said if I found the bloom, you'd be mine. I didn't come for that," he said. "I came because I believed someone should take your words seriously." Leora looked at him, her mouth opening, then closing again. She didn't know what to say. She had joked to hide her feelings, to seem strong and above it all. She never thought anyone would risk their life for her words. And yet, here he was, standing before her with scars and silence. A child stepped forward from the crowd and asked in a small voice, "Is the human your mate now?" Everyone turned to Leora, even Jack, though his face showed no pressure. He would accept any answer, even if it broke him. She looked down at the bloom, which still glowed gently in her hands. Then she looked at Jack, remembering all the times. He helped without asking, smiled without mocking, and stood without fear. She took a deep breath, then said quietly, "He might be." Gasps echoed across the camp. The Emperor turned pale. But no one stopped her, because something had changed, not just in the camp, but in the air. The bloom began to glow brighter, then split into two. One part resting in her palm, the other floating to Jack's hand, and when they each held a half, the jungle behind them lit up like a path had opened. No one spoke, no one dared. Jack didn't smile. He simply nodded once, and for the first time, Leora nodded back, not as a joke, not as a game, but as something real. The bloom of Zavara now pulsed between two hands, half rested in Jack's palm, warm and calm like a sleeping flame. The other half lay in Leora's hand, glowing slightly stronger. The two pieces seemed drawn to each other, pulling gently like magnets of light, but no one dared to move. The jungle behind them stayed silent. Yet something had shifted. Birds didn't chirp, leaves didn't rustle, even the wind waited. Then, without warning, the ground beneath the camp gave a soft hum. The stone floor under their feet lit up with thin golden lines. Ancient symbols began crawling from the earth like fireflies drawing maps. People stepped back in fear. The Emperor shouted orders, but no one listened anymore. Their eyes were fixed on the glow between the human and the alien girl, and the strange path that was forming under them. Leora looked at the half of the bloom in her hand. It wasn't just a flower, it was something more. It spoke to her, not in words, but in feelings. Memories not her own floated through her mind. Wars, peace treaties, stars exploding. Hands joined across galaxies. The bloom didn't just belong to Zavara. It had been created to bind species together, not with laws or threats, but with shared truth. It had waited for someone worthy, not strong, not rich, just real. Now it had chosen to. Jack stood still, trying to understand the pictures flashing behind his eyes. He saw a world he had never visited, a planet filled with gardens and towers, made of singing crystal. He saw two lovers, one human, one alien, holding the original bloom. And then the burning war, betrayal, and silence. The bloom was split to protect it, and now, after 100 years, it had awakened again. Leora staggered back, her breath shaking. The bloom. "It's showing me things," she said. Jack nodded slowly. "Me too." The Emperor stepped forward now, rage in his eyes. "That thing is a weapon of manipulation," he snapped. "It turned you against your own blood." He raised a device. In his hand, something small but sharp and deadly. "I will not let a myth control my daughter." Before he could activate it, the bloom flared up. A wave of light surged out, throwing him back without touching him. The device melted in his hand, and he screamed in pain. But it wasn't anger that filled the air now, it was something heavier. Truth. From above, the sky darkened as ships began to circle overhead. Other species were arriving, answering the ancient signal the bloom had released. They came not with weapons, but with silence and respect. They had felt the calling too. The galaxy had been waiting for this moment. Jack looked at Leora. "What happens now?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and pressed her half of the bloom against his. The two halves joined with a soft chime, and then everything changed. The camp disappeared, the people faded, even the sky vanished. Jack and Leora stood in an endless space filled with stars and whispers. They were inside the bloom now, or maybe the bloom was inside them. A voice spoke. Not from outside, but from within. "You are the bond," it said. The joke became a promise. The promise became the test. And the test became the truth. Images rushed by them, different species shaking hands, enemies embracing, the galaxy healing, not with power, but with choice, and they were the first spark. When they blinked again, they were back at the camp. The bloom was gone, vanished into their skin, into their hearts. The ground cooled. The symbols faded, but something new remained, an invisible thread between them, between all who had seen, The Emperor was silent now, sitting on the ground like a man who had lost a battle he never understood. Leora walked to him and placed her hand on his shoulder. "We're not following myths," she said softly. "We're becoming them." Jack looked at the horizon, where the jungle met the sky. He had come to prove something. Now he was part of something bigger. Something that didn't belong to just one world. The crew didn't cheer, didn't shout. They simply bowed their heads in quiet respect, because they knew, without needing words, everything had changed, and far above, in the orbiting ships. Leaders watched in silence. The bloom had chosen, and now, so must they. The camp was quiet for days. No more jokes, no more shouting, only quiet work, hushed voices, and eyes that kept glancing at Jack and Leora, like they were no longer just crew members. Something had changed, not just around them, but inside them. Bloom no longer glowed in their hands. It had disappeared, melted into their skin, their thoughts, their hearts, but the bond remained. It wasn't something they could see, yet everyone could feel it. Jack spent his mornings fixing broken solar panels or repairing tools. He never spoke about the jungle anymore. He didn't need to. People looked at him differently, now not like a human out of place, but like someone who had become part of something greater. Leora spent her days speaking with the envoys that had arrived from orbit. Alien leaders from far worlds had come in secret shuttles, not for politics or war. They came just to see, to witness the two who had awakened the bloom. To understand what it meant, Jack and Leora didn't pretend to know all the answers. They only knew one thing: the galaxy had needed a signal. And somehow, through a joke and a flower, they had become that signal. But late one evening, as two suns dipped behind the trees, something soft and strange happened. Leora stood near the edge of camp, watching the sky. Her silver hair glowed in the twilight, and she held something in her hand, a piece of old cloth, torn from Jack's jacket. She had taken it when she thought he was gone forever. She kept it because she couldn't forget the look in his eyes the night she made that joke. Jack stepped beside her quietly, not saying anything. They stood side by side in silence. Then she finally said, "You did it." He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "You found it," she added, her voice quieter. "The flower." Jack smiled slightly. "You didn't think I would," he said. Leora shook her head, laughing softly. "No, I thought you'd get eaten by moss beasts or fall into a sinkhole." He chuckled, but said nothing else. Then she turned to him, face more serious now. "I said I'd be yours if you found it," she whispered. "And you did." Jack looked at her with calm eyes. "I didn't want to trap you in a promise," he said. "I just wanted to be someone you could believe in." She stepped closer, close enough that their hands almost touched. "I didn't mean the joke," she said. "I meant the feeling behind it." He tilted his head, curious. "And what was the feeling?" Leora took a deep breath. "Loneliness," she said, "and a hope that anyone might hear something real beneath the joke." Jack didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her hand. It wasn't a kiss or a dramatic moment. It was simple, honest and quiet. But in that soft touch, something passed between them, not light, not words, just understanding. Behind them, the crew watched from a distance. No one interrupted. No one made a sound. They all knew the joke had become a legend. And the legend had become something even rarer truth. Later that night, under the twin moons, a celebration started, not for Jack and Leora, not just for the bloom, but for the first time in many years. Different species danced together. They shared food, songs, and stories in 100 different languages. Peace had not been forced, it had been earned. And at the center of it all stood the human who believed in a myth, and the alien girl who had once laughed, but now understood the cost of a careless word. They didn't sit on thrones, they didn't lead armies, but they had done what leaders could not. They had found a way forward. One flower, one bond, one quiet, stubborn human who took a joke seriously. And when the music slowed and the stars brightened above, Leora leaned close and whispered into Jack's ear, Her face when he did? Jack smiled and replied, she never forgot it, and neither did the galaxy.